Hey everyone, in this video I wanted to give my honest opinions on Gray Zone Warfare, which I was fortunate enough to get early access to. The devs over at Madfigure Games gave out a bunch of codes to a lot of content creators and their friends actually to basically stress test the game prior to its early access release for all players. I put in over 50 hours so far, and there are a lot of things to talk about. Many things that I really like, and many things that can be improved upon. Everything that I talk about is going to be based on the gameplay loop and experience, and I'm not going to dive into any of the technical difficulties that we've experienced because all those are going to continue to get ironed out over time. And just a few days into this test already, there's already been multiple updates. So we're just going to stick to the meat and potatoes, which is the actual game. Also important to note, I'm not sponsored or being paid to hype up the game. So this is just going to be me, my pure thoughts on what I've experienced so far. I'll give a quick overview of the game itself before we dive into everything. Gray Zone Warfare is a PvEVP tactical shooter with an emphasis on realistic gameplay. One of the premises of the game revolves around a quarantine event, which is bringing these PMCs to Lemang. That's the area, a fictional area that is in Southeast Asia. They're brought in to be security forces on the island, but as they interact with the NPCs and locals, they start to realize the truth about what's happening on the island. Players will join one of 3 PMC groups and start doing jobs and missions for the locals, which begins their journey through the story of the game. Okay, so now you've got a little bit of an idea of what's going on. Once again, keep in mind that this is early access, and these are impressions on the game in its current alpha state, guys. It's in alpha. Many things are going to change over the months ahead and in the days ahead as we continue to see development of Gray Zone Warfare work towards its 1.0 release. So let's start with the things that I like. The first thing that pops out is how beautiful the game is. The visuals on this game are incredible. The jungle atmosphere is looking really good on the Unreal Engine 5, and this really helps dial in that immersion feel that we're looking for in these realistic FPS games. So the visuals are an A+ right out of the gate. Okay, my personal favorite thing about Gray Zone Warfare is the player-to-player interaction. And I don't mean PvP, but I mean your ability to communicate with your other faction members. The base camp is a place where players can connect with each other and create squads, coordinate attacks or counterattacks on different points of interest that might be crawling with other enemy faction players, or even just hang out and meet new people. I can't tell you how many times I queued in solo, just started talking to people at the base, and ended up on an adventure that I wasn't planning on. Or even simply found someone in the area that I was doing tasks and we linked up and we helped each other out. The camaraderie with your faction is definitely real, and the ability to see where every single player of your faction is on the map is huge. Like, I could load into a server right now, check the map, and maybe see like 7 of my faction mates all on a contested area POI, and I'm like, okay, there's probably a lot going on over there. I'm gonna hop onto a helo and hit the nearest landing zone and start helping out. The player-to-player connections are truly my favorite thing so far in this game. Another really big positive is GZW is actually going to have PvE servers where players can only have the threat of AI instead of both AI and enemy faction players. Not only will this have PvE servers, but these servers will also have full player progression, including leveling and task completion. This is huge for casual players that like the idea of hardcore shooters, but they don't have the time to invest crazy hours to hone their skills and compete in a ruthless PvP environment. Now, don't get it twisted, this isn't going to be pure easy mode on these PvE servers. The AI are definitely a force to be reckoned with, and I have died many times already to the AI, so it's not going to be a cakewalk, but it is a much more manageable situation without PvP. Next up, we've got the persistent servers. So this is a big one because GZW is on a persistent server instead of the instance-based experience that we've seen with basically every other game that you've played. So the servers are just on all the time, and players can come and go and play the game, and the persistent world continues on with or without them. This concept really helps with immersion. It's just cool to know that when you sign off, that the faction battles continue on, you know, and play out even when you're logged off. It just helps create this sense of a larger world. Next up is the deep mission progression. So the early access has 150 missions, which is a pretty big chunk of content. These missions start off by sending you into a starting town where the enemies are less lethal to help let the players get a little bit more comfortable with the game mechanics. Once you finish these missions, which by the way takes many hours, players will start to be sent to other contested points of interest where competing factions share the same missions as you. This is when the PvP really starts to get locked in and really involved. It's funny because at first you're like, wait, there's virtually no PvP in this game. The first 10 hours, you're like, there's nothing. I've only seen one guy. And then as you progress, you're like, damn, there's a lot of PvP everywhere. And obviously I haven't completed everything. And in fact, I'm 50 hours in, I've only completed something like 40 missions or so. So if you like missions, there's a lot for you to do here. And for me, there is an addictive quality to this game. So there's something about the game that is so addictive for me when I play. I find myself logging in even after I've streamed for 10 hours in one day. I'm compelled to log back in and see what was going on the servers. I found myself going in for a few impromptu missions and PvP excursions with people that I just met randomly in the town. I think a lot of it is coming back to the connection that you make with your faction and wanting to help them gain control of those high priority areas on the server. In fact, even now, as I'm making this video, I would rather be logged in and seeing what is going on. I'm not gonna lie. We also got great solid gunplay in this game. It's very, very important, obviously, to have realistic milsim style shooter gunplay, and my impressions so far are that the gunplay is solid. The recoil and gun mechanics seem to be somewhat forgiving and not too punishing, so a nice middle of the road sort of, but at the same time it's still staying true to that realistic feel that we're all looking for. I think the balance here between realism and accessibility to the player base is pretty solid right now. Next up, we've got the development team. I really do like this development team. It's kind of key to have a good team for an ambitious project like this, especially when there's so many things that need to be dialed in to make the project successful. From all of the experiences that I've had so far with the people at Madfigure Games, it's been nothing but positive. For example, on the first day of the early access launch, I was having some major issues getting the game to work. They had multiple people ready to help creators like me. There was a few of us that were having issues. I got onto a one-on-one call with a tech-savvy individual, and after an hour, and it did take that long, of troubleshooting, we finally got the game working solid. That's just an example. They were willing to take that much time out of their day and work with me in a one-on-one to help me get the game going. And that's just an example, but from everything else I'm hearing from others, they are having a similarly great experience. So the team is highly engaged with the audience, passionate about the project, of course, and very helpful thus far. So those are the things that I really dig about the game, but there are some things that need improvement. Before we dive into that though, remember, this is an early access alpha, okay? It's an alpha, and we are basically guinea pigs for them to see how the game is flowing and what needs to be fixed and adjusted. I guarantee a lot of the things I'm about to go over are already being looked at by the devs. Okay, so number one, for me personally, I think this game would massively benefit from a proper loot table. And what I mean by a loot table is a vast array of in-game items that can be looted, loose loot, or inside objects. This loot would all have varying values and potential uses, everything from a common screwdriver to the ultra rare graphics card. Having a robust loot table creates what we like to call dopamine roulette. That's that moment when you're looting an object and all of a sudden a rare item appears and you're like, holy crap, I gotta get out of here, I gotta exfil, and you really get invested in securing that item. This is not only going to bring an element of intensity and a will to survive for players, but it also presents a viable means of building up your own in-game economy. With games like this, worrying about your bankroll creates gear fear, and gear fear creates that intensity that we're looking for. And right now, GZW has loot, but it's really only medical supplies, food, guns, gear, and ammo. So when I'm trying to get money, I'm typically just looking for weapons and weapon parts to sell back to the traders. And now you can get a huge amount of money from doing the tasks, of course, but if you're dying a lot trying to do those tasks, then you might want to shift gears and focus on making money, and there's really not any great ways of making money other than just selling weapon parts to the traders. A strong loot table for me is a big thing, and I think it would really benefit the game. I know it's not for everybody, and there are concerns about real money transactions kind of taking over. That's where someone finds a rare item and then sells that item on eBay or something. But even in this game's current state, there could be a market for that kind of stuff. There are keys that have unlimited uses. There are better weapons and things like that. All things that can just be dropped for another player. So we're already in that territory anyway. I'm not sure that it's going to cause any major issue outside of one that we might already have anyway. Okay, the big one is PvP. I could go on for a while about this one, but I'll try to keep it succinct. So as I said earlier, the gunplay is solid. So getting into gunfights with other players is fun. But from my experience, so far anyway, so much of the fights are happening in the deep jungle areas. And when that happens, players are playing very slow and often bush camping. In a game with high risk upon death, players will play in any manner that gives them the best chance of survival, and playing slow in this game gives you a better chance of survival, no doubt about it. Now, don't get me wrong, players should be allowed to play games in different ways, but it feels like this game doesn't promote faster gameplay styles with the amount of fighting that's happening in these dense foliage areas. I like games where players can be successful playing with a slow play style or a fast one. That said, however, I don't think this is a lost cause by any means. To me, the question is, how do you get the PvP to offer a wider range of playstyles? And the first thing that comes to mind is get the PvP action into the actual points of interest. The POIs have way more interesting PvP engagement opportunities, and from what I've seen so far, they aren't typically the focal point of many encounters at all. Buff the loot in the points of interest. Make people care more about going into them and try to move that action in there away from the bushes a bit more. Now, if you're a fan of fighting in the bush, that's okay. I wouldn't worry. I don't think it would actually extinguish this since so much of the map is jungle. But we need some more variety in the PvP. I know everyone has a different idea of what PvP should look like in their favorite game, but I think most people that play GZW will agree that it does need some adjusting. To piggyback on the campy nature of its current state, we need to talk about the infill and exfil deaths. There are many landing zones or LZs scattered around the map. For example, a single point of interest could have 2 LZs, one on either side, east and west, giving players an option when it comes to entering or leaving that area. But the problem is, those LZs are shared by the enemy factions as well. That means that you could grab a helicopter out to a point of interest, fly for 5 minutes in the helicopter, only to be killed right when you land just because another team is either camping the LZ or even worse, just waiting for their ride back to their base and you show up right in front of them. This happened to me. I was trying to fly back. It's a 5-minute wait time for the helo to arrive for me. And in that 5 minutes, 2 enemy helicopters landed in the LZ that I'm just waiting for. So of course I just killed them getting off the helo because what am I going to do? Be like, hey, sorry, I'm just trying to leave. No, that's not going to work in a game like this. There's a lot of stress on this game. You're trying to make friends on someone jumping out of a helo in an instant, it ain't going to happen. So they died. And then I took my helo home, but I felt bad about it. And to make matters worse, you need to understand the current state of how the helicopters work. Right now, only 4 helos of your faction can be on the map at one time. Otherwise, you have to wait until one clears the map before you can call it in. So if you die, you spawn back at the base camp. And then you try and call in another helo to get back to the fight where you were fighting with your friends and recover your gear. And in some of the more involved fights, there are many friendlies and enemies dying and fighting it out. And that creates a train of helicopters to a specific POI. And if it's on the other side of the map, you're going to have all 4 of them flying to a spot 5 minutes away, and you're effectively stun locking every other player on the map from using helicopters to go to some other place that they want to go to. Maybe they're trying to do a mission close by or whatever. They can't take a helo because all 4 of them are on 5-minute loops all the way out and then 5 minutes back to get to the base camp. So there's really 2 issues here. 1, the LZs are too predictable and can easily be camped, and 2, limited helos combined with the amount of time it takes to get to the other end of the map can lock players from leaving or returning to their base. I'm sure the devs are looking at solutions to these. It's not as easy as you think, like, oh, let's just add a helo. That's maybe not the best play because then you have it much easier for players to keep funneling back to locations over and over again and kind of ruining the flow of that gameplay. I know it's a pain point, and there's going to be a solution. What it is, I don't know. There's got to be some kind of balance there. But right now, these 2 things definitely need to be adjusted with regards to the helo. Now, you're never going to stop exfil camping. Don't get me wrong. In these types of games, it's going to be inherent. But I fully expect the devs to come up with something, an alternate solution, because right now, it's not working. Okay, another major pain point, I swear this is the last one on PvP, is being able to identify if a player is friendly or not. I fully expect this to be changed in the very near future as well, but all players on each faction are wearing the exact same gear. So when you're in a firefight, it's nearly impossible to tell who is who. Now, yes, there is a map and you can pull it up and check your teammate locations, but even with a map, it can be difficult to judge the location, and in the heat of the battle, you just don't have time to do that. So how do we make it easier for players to ID teammates without losing that wonderful sense of realism that Gray Zone Warfare has? Well, in a perfect world, I would say, hey, can we just have every single faction have slightly different clothing and gear coloring so that players can like quickly make that judgment call? Or maybe something as simple as adding colorful armbands to give players' eyes something quick to ID when bullets start flying. So those are the things with PvP. PvP is a big one. I know this is a PvE first type of game, but when you start playing it, you realize that, you know, after the first 10 hours or so, every single place that you're going to has a real threat of PvP. So this game does have a lot of PvP. So nailing that PvP experience goes without saying. We really need to make sure it gets dialed in. Okay, a couple little things here. And again, these are all things that are probably being worked on right now or already have future planned updates to. The terrain is absolutely beautiful. We talked about this. The outskirts and in between a lot of the POIs is just pure jungle. And in a lot of places, there's absolutely nothing. So more POIs would be huge. They've already talked about it. It's going to be part of future updates where they're going to be adding more POIs. But the world is huge and the areas around the POIs that we have are solid. There are massive chunks of areas of the map that are just pure jungle and no one would ever really go through them. But I fully expect those areas to be filled in at a future time. Okay, next, not enough weapon types. There's only 8 total weapons. Now, they do have the ability to kind of take the weapon platform, if you will, and craft different styles of weapons based around the platform. So using the AK as an example, there's many different variations of the AK that you could use. You could make one for close range, short, / long range, you never know. So there are options to really build out the gun for different uses. But only 8 total types of guns is a little bit low. But of course, again, they're going to add guns to a future update. I mean, adding guns to the game is going to be easy, right? Once they get the gameplay loop dialed in, which is the most important thing right now, they'll start working on adding more guns and POIs and things like that to the game. Also, I feel like the audio is a little tinny for me. I can barely hear. I can't actually. You know what? I can't hear footsteps in this game. The only thing I ever hear is bugs, birds, and bushes wrestling. And that's pretty much it. I don't know if I've ever heard a footstep in this game. And I think that the gun sounds are a little tinny, but again, I'm sure that's something that they're going to iron out. But it's certainly not the end of the world by any means. I mean, yeah, the footsteps would be nice. But the game is fun, trust me. Lastly, the AI. The AI are too accurate. They are stupid accurate. The amount of times I've been one-tapped is crazy. This has already kind of been noticed by the devs. They've already talked about this publicly. The AI are cracked out of their minds sometimes, or they're actually incredibly stupid. It's one or the other. It's like a wide spectrum. Either the AI can't do anything, it stares right at you and misses every shot, and you one-tap it in the head, or you shoot the AI in the head 5 times, it doesn't die, and then it one-taps you in an instant. So it's kind of like we needed a little bit of a middle ground with the AI. So those are my early thoughts on the game after 50 hours. At this stage of development, the game is in a great spot. It's addictive and immersive with some solid gunplay, but needs some tweaking to get the PvP into a slightly better spot. Overall, a great foundation for a game, and one of the more impressive alpha builds that you'll ever see. It's not perfect, obviously, but one of the beauties of early access is that it gets the community involved. The developers are going to hear our voice and make changes as necessary. If you're into realistic style shooters, then Gray Zone Warfare will likely be one that you'll want to take a look at. Thanks for watching. Make sure to drop a sub for more Gray Zone Warfare content, and I'll catch you in the next one.